Hey, so don't worry about the video part of this video. This is a podcast format just like the Guild Wars 1 lore video. So just drop this on your second monitor or put it on before your morning drive and strap in because we are getting into the lore of Guild Wars 2 from game launch to just before Path of Fire. Let's get it. So after all of the Guild Wars 1 stuff happened, Guild Wars 2 has a time skip of 250 years. And boy, have a lot of things changed. The biggest thing that changed were mostly geography and character stuff. We have a whole new race involved, and every single one of them has problems. To cover these guys briefly, we of course have the humans who got wrecked the entire first game by basically everyone. Their primary capital is in 𝙬𝙤 now, and their primary problem is centaurs. But they also have themselves, just like in real life. But then you got the 𝙭𝙗, which are basically less racist than they were. They don't call you 𝙂𝙒 anymore. And their main problem is the Inquest, which are also 𝙭𝙗, except they're like Third Reich 𝙭𝙗. They don't call you 𝙂𝙒 either, but they just do really unethical experimentation on other races. Which the regular 𝙭𝙗 do also, but they do it more ethically. They're the same, and honestly, the rats, they're the most problematic race of the game, realistically. But we also got the Norn, who they just get drunk now. They have gone from the solo player playstyle to where they're more or less just big, dumb, drunk humans. And their primary enemy is basically misogyny, where the men just go off to worship the ice dragon and then become corrupted, and they're the sons of Svanir. That's like their main thing. But we got the Char, and the Char are basically fully domesticated now. In the 250 years, they built the Black Citadel on top of the ruins of old Ascalon, which is a power move, and ironically, the old king of Ascalon used some magic to turn all of the Ascalonians from the OG fight into ghosts. So the Char are basically just fighting ghosts. They're fighting themselves, but they're more or less cool with the other races at this point. There's a lot of infighting though. The last race that is new to the story is the 𝙂𝙑, and these are tree people. They are legit trees. Their main enemies are the Nightmare Court and the 𝙭𝙗, ironically, but we'll get into that a little later. There's a lot to cover about the 𝙂𝙑, and spoiler, the entire Heart of Thorns expansion is kind of focused around them, but we'll move on. The main problem is that one of the Elder Dragons has woken up. So back in Guild Wars 1, right before the end of Guild Wars 1, you had Primordus waking up, and we put him back to sleep. He was causing earthquakes all around the different continents and everything. So now we actually have one that has fully woken up, and this is 𝙬𝙤𝙚. Problem is, this is like a whole world-threatening calamity. So Primordus was like the fire dragon, 𝙬𝙤𝙚 is the dragon of death. So we got zombies popping up everywhere, and it's kind of bad. The core story is basically that you have all these localized problems that you need to resolve, and they all basically merge around three orders, the three factions in Tyria, and they all have mixed races. They're all very inclusive, but these are the Vigil, the Priory, and the Order of Whispers. The first two are new, and the last one is a throwback to this like Shadow Society from Guild Wars 1. That part's irrelevant, but in short, the Priory are all researchers and knowledge people. The Vigil are like the army demolition team type of stuff. And Order of Whispers are like super sleuths or spies, intel people, right? And with that, we are introduced to some notable heroes that are basically doing the Lord's work before the player character enters the scene to do their job. And these are Zoja, Kaith, Ridlock, Logan, and Air. One of each race, the real Delta forces of a team. Anyway, they all got beef with each other because Zoja's mentor, named Snaff, died during one of their adventures because Logan was supposed to back them up, but instead went to simp for Queen Jenna who's like the queen of Kryta. There are a few other notable characters like Countess Anise, and they come into play, but this band of heroes is called Destiny's Edge, which had a book about their backstory, and they basically get written out of the Guild Wars 2 story pretty quickly. But they all have their own little individual parts to play, and they do kind of show face as the main NPC heroes outside of the player character. After you solve some of these like localized problems, you end up meeting up with this dude named 𝙗𝙗𝙗𝙗, and he is basically saying that we need to band everybody together to fight this dragon because 𝙬𝙤𝙀 is like messing everybody's up. So we form the Pact, that's what it's called, the Pact, and get buy-in from everybody, including Destiny's Edge, to travel to 𝙗𝙒, where 𝙬𝙀𝙀 awoke, and that's where we're gonna, hunt this dude down and put him down. So we track him down and kill him. Following that, everybody's like, oh snap, we could go back to our peaceful life and just get back to fighting centaurs and stuff. And then you realize some of the baddie races are like teaming up, which is weird. Like the Dredge, who are mole people, are like straight up the mole people from the Incredibles, and the Flame Legion, which are a legion of Char that I still think like worship Titans or something. They're teaming up together and sharing tech with each other, which is causing problems. That's the Molten Alliance, right? And then you have the Nightmare Court, which are the 𝙂𝙂 people. They're teaming up with 𝙬𝙤𝙳, and they're calling themselves the Toxic Alliance. And so these two alliances are causing problems in Tyria after 𝙬𝙀𝙀 gets killed. Just for some backstory, the Nightmare Court are people that are 𝙂𝙂, but they were like rebellious youth. The thing about 𝙂𝙂 is that they're basically born from the Pale Tree, and this is like their mom. And they were influenced by a philosophy set forth by the Ventari tablet. And Ventari was like Gandhi. He was like a centaur who was like all pacifist and nice. So these like tree creatures were born. They found Jesus and they're like, good. Meanwhile, the Nightmare Court were like, bro, nah, I ain't doing that. Sometimes they're like born normal and then they run into the Inquest, who basically are like, oh man, these plant creatures are weird. Like, we're going to experiment on them. And then it turns them bad, which is like, kind of understandable. But in short, the Nightmare Court is the bad faction of 𝙂𝙂, and they team up with the 𝙬𝙳𝙀, who are like magical baddie snake people who they just like to enslave people. That's like their main thing, is they build these like really ugly structures in the water and then they enslave people. One last note on the 𝙂𝙂 that might be useful later is that they are growing on the Pale Tree, and while they're growing, they exist in what's called the Dream, and the Dream is designed to give them like purpose. Sometimes it's like fighting a monster, sometimes it's doing something else. And overall, the Dream purposing is what they call like a wild hunt. Like a wild hunt is like when you actually have a monster to go fight, but some 𝙂𝙂 get them and some don't. 𝙗𝙗𝙗𝙗's wild hunt was defeating 𝙬𝙀𝙀, for example, which he succeeded in. But anyways, all these baddies are teaming up, and we're like, yo, it's pretty strange. We meet up with some new hero prospects like Rox, who is a cat who doesn't have a warband, so she's just a Char doing solo playing, And then you got a Bram, who's just a kid and he wants to prove himself, and he's more or less an idiot. You meet an 𝙭named 𝙤𝙗𝙗, who's like god tier intelligence even among her race, but her elders don't like the idea of getting shown up by some kid, so she's just completely trashed by all of the other 𝙭. You also meet Cashmere Mead, who is basically like an exiled royal. And you also meet Marjorie, who's like a Canthan edgelord detective. Like, that's all, it's a throwback. She's a necromancer. Anyway, whatever. At some point, you hear about this person named Scarlet Briar, who is a 𝙂𝙂 who is super smart, but also like super insane. She's like a real Harley Quinn type vibe, but she loves ley lines. And 𝙤𝙗𝙗 explains to us that ley lines are basically like magical rivers of energy that connect up the world. And 𝙤𝙗𝙗 also like low-key looks up to Scarlet, even though she's a baddie, right? And Scarlet was a 𝙂𝙂 who was able to study under 𝙭colleges and stuff before being kicked out. So we learned that she is responsible for blowing up the Thaumanova reactor and blowing up a lot of, like, causing a lot of problems, basically. Like, Scarlet is behind a lot of the problems that we see that are just kind of localized right now. Anyway, in short, Scarlet is doing all this kind of crazy stuff with a band of sky pirates called the 𝙬𝙧𝙚𝙚. Now, these people are just kind of like techno pirates. They travel into the mist. They do a lot of weird stuff. And the 𝙬𝙧𝙚𝙚 kind of come in later, but Scarlet is basically their leader at this time and possibly their founder. Eventually, Scarlet plans to come take action, and we have no idea what her plans are at this point, but all we know is that she comes and firebombs Lion's Arc and like poisons it. That's like the central hub of the human empire. Basically gasses everyone and deploys this giant machine called the Breachmaker, which drills into the Crichton Harbor. Like it drills directly into the lake. And so we end up boarding the Breachmaker, try to make it stop, and we kill Scarlet. But right before she dies, her giant drill like taps the ley line that runs under Lion's Arc, and it ends up waking up another dragon. And at this point, we don't know why or what motivation she had to do this. It's just kind of like senseless violence. But you end up meeting with a nomadic group of crystal lovers called the Zephyrites, and apparently one of their Sylvari members like went crazy and bombed out one of their airships. So like we got to go investigate. We head over to 𝙬𝙧𝙚, where we meet a Seraph who is Marjorie's sister, and we're like trying to figure out like, hey, we're trying to get into the Maguma Way, see what's up with the Zephyrites. And eventually you get to 𝙬𝙧𝙚, start investigating, and you break into this like rundown shack which was once occupied by Scarlet, right? And 𝙤𝙗 immediately starts simping, even though she just like murked like all of Lion's Arc. And us and our band of junior varsity heroes are like gonna follow this trail, and it seems like Scarlet was super into ley lines, and there was one near there, right? So in the meantime, the rest of Tyria is having its waypoints all messed up. These apparently run on ley energy. However, they're being attacked by these vines that are like popping up out of the ground. There's a town that gets like completely wrecked by giant vines. And there's a town that gets like completely wrecked by like giant vines. You go there to investigate and you find out like everyone died or left, you know. So you head back into Scarlet's lab and you learn it's probably 𝙤𝙤𝙚, who is the jungle dragon, which is mentioned in Scarlet's notes. Now you end up finding a secret passage that like leads further into the wastelands. And you find this lab that was built on like a giant ley line hub. While 𝙤𝙗 is investigating that, more places are attacked by these vines. And you find out that Marjorie's sister got straight up killed, like GG, at one of these places. So you go back to the hub. 𝙤𝙗 tells you that she found this thing called 𝙂𝙗𝙗's machine, where it was modded by Scarlet, and everyone thinks this like probably made her go insane. So 𝙤𝙗's like, nah, I'm gonna try it, which is when our player character basically pushes her out of the way and gets like a full dose from the machine, where we like immediately trip out. We're viewing like the eternal alchemy and the pale tree and all these like orbs flying around, and then the vision ends, right? And the eternal alchemy is what the Azura worship, and it's basically like nature in the world of Tyria and just kind of like the circle of life. But basically the commander saw dragons attacking the pale tree, so she decides to go up with the pale tree in Kashmir and lets all the other world leaders know that 𝙤𝙤𝙚 is on the menu. Like, we got to go kill this dragon. Now, the next part of the story takes place in a lot of different places, since pretty much you bring it up that like, hey, 𝙤𝙤𝙚's waking up. We gotta go handle this. None of the other world leaders care about us, and Scarlet just basically screwed everybody up during their shenanigans. So we needed to earn the trust of the various leaders by solving their own problems first. Like, so we go with Rytlock and banish some ghosts. During this time, he actually follows his swords into the mist, and that causes some problems, but we'll get into that later. But that happens, and then we go and help fight the Sons of Svanir and all the misogyny with Braum and Air, which kind of rekindles their mother-child bond. Like, how sweet, right? And then we help Countess Anise figure out who is plotting against the queen, right? But at this point, 𝙤𝙤𝙚's influence is all over Central Tyria, with monsters all over the Char areas, a couple of towns being completely wrecked in 𝙬𝙤. And after that, everyone's like, okay, we'll have a summit and we'll figure out what's going on, where all the leaders come and they basically complain about how they got better stuff to do. And that pretty much changed when big old dragon attacked the summit and the pale tree. And the pale tree gets pretty injured, and this whole plot line gets completely ignored, like the pale tree's recovery and all that stuff, because everybody just is like, all right, let's go fight 𝙂𝙧𝙗𝙗. At this point, we are headed over to 𝙂𝙗𝙗, where we're traveling into the 𝙂𝙗𝙗 jungle, and this is a big deal because we basically learned that 𝙂𝙧𝙗𝙗 is the entire jungle. The whole act that we set up for our big fight with 𝙬𝙤𝙯 was mobilized and more or less immediately destroyed. The giant vines like just came out of the jungle, ripped all the airships out of the sky, and so the entirety of the old guard of Destiny's Edge is lost in the jungle, excluding Ritlock, because like he was on his own ghost adventure looking for his sword, right? But everyone else basically was lost in the jungle. So we set off to save them with our band of new allies. The main point is that 𝙟𝙪, who is Braum's mom, ends up being betrayed and dies, which is kind of canon moment for him, since he goes from being like dumb funny character to straight up like douchey character for pretty much the rest of the story. We learn in the earlier season stories that there was a remaining egg from Glint, our friendly neighborhood crystal dragon, which 𝙂𝙤 actually stole and ripped off into the forest with. So she just took the egg, boned out into the forest. And this wouldn't be that big of a deal, except that we learned through various stories that the 𝙬𝙧 are actually dragon minions of 𝙂𝙧𝙗𝙗. So all of the 𝙬𝙧 NPCs and the player characters, we were all originally dragon minions that were pseudo-cleansed through their like Buddhist Ventari tablet religion. But all of the wild hunts and the dreams and all that stuff more or less came from 𝙂𝙧𝙗𝙗. So in short, 𝙂𝙤 ripped out into the jungle with the stolen egg from Glint, and her counterparts in Destiny's Edge are all jacked up. Some of them died. And we're here to figure this all out. The majority of the time we spend in the jungle is learning about the jungle, right? The various frog races, learn how to jump on mushrooms, glide, speak their language. And we learn of various ley lines in the jungle. In short, we decide we got to take the fight to 𝙂𝙧𝙗𝙗, where 𝙬𝙪𝙗, who is a 𝙬𝙧 and the leader of the pack, ends up becoming fused with 𝙂𝙧𝙗𝙗. There is a two-front attack against the jungle dragon. One consists of attacking his physical form with a giant assault at the aptly named dragon stand. And we also take the fight to 𝙂𝙧𝙗𝙗's mind by entering 𝙬𝙪𝙗's mind and fighting the mind version of 𝙂𝙧𝙗𝙗. After defeating 𝙂𝙧𝙗𝙗, he claims that we need to end his life because there are remnants of 𝙂𝙧𝙗𝙗 within him. So we kill him, and that's the end of the jungle dragon. 𝙤𝙗𝙗, our Azuran friend, takes special interest in studying 𝙂𝙧𝙗𝙗 and sets up a lot of infrastructure surrounding the dragon, because during our exploration, we discovered an abandoned Azuran city known as Radanovis, which has a bunch of dragon research stuff already there. So she commandeers all that and uses it to study the other dragons alongside 𝙂𝙧𝙗𝙗. Following the battles in the jungle, there is still quite a bit of trouble lurking around. The start of the post Heart of Thorns story actually ends up taking place in the raid wings of Guild Wars 2. So we're now traveling into the Forsaken Thicket with help from Scholar Glenna. But this storyline follows a group of envoy who are like elite warriors who are ambushed and captured by bandits. And they end up getting taken through the Spirit Vale in Sabbath's group of bandits, where she basically mocks the commander as saying, "You are here for soldiers, like you don't even know what's going on." So we kill her, we move through the jungle, we fight this big old sloth, kill some more bandits, and then we move on to this temple where we meet Matthias Gabriel, who is wearing like white mantle robes and stuff, who are the baddies who worship the Mersat back in the day. So he is like sacrificing people on this bloodstone, and we end up killing him before moving on to this big old stronghold known as the Stronghold of the Faithful, where you fight through a bunch of white mantle and this giant keep construct, giant stone statue, to find Zera, who is a giant powerful well, very powerful mesmer. She takes the form of this giant being. But once you take her down, you find a summoning altar that is clearly meant to revive a 𝙂𝙒2. This 𝙂𝙒2 is none other than Lazarus. From there, the story continues to Bloodstone Fen, right? So you did the raid, you move on to Bloodstone Fen. The Bloodstone basically explodes, and the magic was absorbed right before the shockwave could take out the commander and his team. The world, in essence, is becoming very unstable. We learn that elder dragons are basically a balancing force for this magic, and we are wondering what happened and who absorbed the Bloodstone energy. You meet up with the Shining Blade and you hunt down 𝙂𝙧, who is a minister, and there's a whole dungeon storyline on 𝙂𝙧. There's a lot of shady stuff happening. But all that stuff happened long before here. That's all core game stuff. 𝙂𝙧 ends up ousting himself as a White Mantle Zealot, and then Lazarus appears to basically denounce 𝙂𝙧 himself, where 𝙂𝙧 just takes a portal and escapes before we can do anything about it. So since he left, we're just like, okay, we gotta figure some of this stuff out. But our heroes end up learning from 𝙂𝙗 that there are strange destroyers in the Fire Island train, right? And that's the same chain that we went to in Guild Wars 1, where we shut the door of 𝙂𝙗. And the destroyers are basically dragon minions of Primordus. And we learned that there are destroyers that have both death magic and jungle magic just roaming around. And it seems like the magic from both Xitan and Morgemoth are being absorbed by like the remaining dragons. So before we move on, during the Battle of Morgemoth, we had to explore the jungle, right? We found Radanovis. And when we did this exploration, we also found this like exalted temple. Now the exalted are a race of people who like bound their souls to suits of armor, like in Full Metal Alchemist. And they're basically followers of 𝙬𝙤𝙧𝙚. 𝙬𝙧 stole the dragon egg, ended up ripping into the jungle and bringing it to this exalted temple known as 𝙬𝙧. During our investigation of the Fire Island chain, the egg actually hatched, and 𝙬𝙧 has been simping for this dragon and dragon egg this whole time. So they kind of have this like telepathic bond or something like that. And the dragon basically tells us her name is 𝙭𝙗 and she's here now. Our Fire Island chain investigation basically yielded that like we were like, yep, the dragons are definitely consuming the dragon energy from the ones that we kill. And we basically end up venturing off to the north to Bitterfrost Frontier because Bram is off doing stuff up there and he wants to avenge his mom or become a real boy or something along those lines, like forge his own legend. So in short, he ends up finding a way of imbuing his mom's bow with some magic, and it ends up being successful, and he was able to like crack 𝙁𝙗𝙗's tooth back in Holbrack. So now he thinks he's like the Norn of legend, right? He's able to go kill 𝙁𝙗𝙗. But we end up visiting the queen because, I mean, well, Minister 𝙂𝙧 was a White Mantle op the whole time. So we go there just in time for the White Mantle to attack. And they end up breaking this dam at Lake Doric, which ends up draining the area. And there is like general White Mantle siege happening. And we find out that basically we need to go like kill 𝙂𝙧. Like this guy got to go down. So we do, and after we kill 𝙂𝙧, we find this relic of Lazarus like inside 𝙂𝙧's manor, and we learned that you had to have all of these relics in place to actually summon this dude. So we already saw Lazarus was here, but how could he have been summoned without this like critical piece of, you know, like it doesn't add up. So the Lazarus that we've been seeing up until this point is not real. So we need to figure out who it is, you know. We get word from Scholar Glenna during this time that they had found like an old 𝙂𝙒2 prison, which was guarded by a jade construct, and we end up traveling through this prison and finding a lot of old 𝙂𝙒2 stuff. We found the Eye of Janthier, which was a relic used in Guild Wars 1 by the White Mantle to figure out who had special sauce, so that way they can like sacrifice them on the Bloodstone. Following this lead, we end up fighting our way through the prison, fighting our way through all this 𝙂𝙒2 stuff, and we find Saul D'Alessio, who was the founder of the White Mantle, and he was taken captive and has been in this prison for centuries now. And he was guarded by this demon named 𝙬𝙗𝙗, which like gets retconned later, but basically he is being tormented by 𝙬𝙗𝙗. So we end up killing 𝙬𝙗𝙗 and freeing 𝙗 and letting him finally die. And to be honest, when we get to the 𝙬𝙗 portion and 𝙬𝙗𝙗 is like a cryptist the whole time, it kind of falls apart. It's better to just assume that 𝙬𝙗𝙗 is like a demon conjured by like Saul's torment or something. It's just better that way. But following that, we lay a trap to figure out who Lazarus actually is, right? So we put a pin in the white mantle story. We killed 𝙂𝙧. We went and let Saul die. And so now we need to figure out who Lazarus is, because we need to uncover the truth and like get to the bottom of things. We're trying to put a pin in all this stuff. So without that relic 𝙂𝙧 had, 𝙬𝙗 would not have been able to resurrect him. So WTF. So we lay a trap and we find out that the person masquerading as Lazarus was in fact 𝙂𝙗, the human god of war and fire. And all the human characters are in shock because like the gods abandoned Tyria a long time ago. And 𝙂𝙗 ends up stealing this device that Timmy made, which was a weapon against the Elder Dragons. And he took this device to Draconis Mons, where he intended to use it on Primordus. We ended up stopping him from using it because the whole magical balance thing, where we basically just set the device to self-destruct mode, and 𝙂𝙗 ends up absorbing a bunch of magic, and then he just dips out. So turns out that the fake Lazarus, or 𝙂𝙗, absorbed all of the Bloodstone explosion magic and all the magic from this thing too. So this dude is getting like really juiced up. Anyways, we meet up with Countess Anise and she's like, hey, go investigate some ruins. So we do, and we find this lady who's like trapped. We free them and they call her 𝙬𝙗𝙚𝙚. And 𝙬𝙗𝙚𝙚 is in fact 𝙬𝙑𝙑 from the first game. Now, 𝙬𝙑𝙑 is a necromancer who she ended up with the Scepter of Ur, which is the scepter that we helped get for like the big bad lich at the end of Prophecies. It ended up in 𝙬𝙑𝙑's hands, and she basically used that to make herself immortal or like keep herself alive. And 𝙬𝙑𝙑 has beef with the 𝙗𝙗, which is why she's at this ruins in the first place. So we found all of these artifacts and we head to this area called Siren's Landing, where we intend to summon Lazarus and kill him, because 𝙬𝙑's like, I don't want this guy coming back, so we're gonna bring him back and we're gonna kill him. We're gonna spawn camp him. So we do that. After that, we're like, yo, but what about 𝙂𝙗? The Eye of Janthier shows up, and Eye of Janthier basically tells us like, hey, he's going to the desert, go kill 𝙂𝙗, and that sets us up for Path of Fire. And we'll be covering Path of Fire through Janthier Wilds on the next one. We'll see. I hope I can get through all of it on the next one. We'll see how long it goes, but for now this is a good spot to put a pin in it, and I'll end up combining all of these videos together and have one giant like mega lore rant from Guild Wars 1 to present day. But for right now, this is a good time to stop. So thanks for listening. Stay tuned for the next part. Like, subscribe, and if you want to support the channel, there is a membership link in the description. With that, thanks to all of my subscribers up to this point. A special thanks to all of my members that support this channel, and I will catch you on the next one. Peace.